Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Discover Your Creativity. I'm Dina Rico from the Creativity Cave, and I'm super excited to share with you today's project. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our different types of ink pads, okay? So we're going to make this card in just a minute, but let me tell you just a bit about the ink that is out there. So Stampin' Up! Has 50 colors of ink. They come in 4 color families: the brights, the regals, the subtles, and the neutrals. And then we have 2 sets of in colors. They last for 2 years each, so there's always an incoming and an outgoing set of in colors. Those are 5 sets of pads. The other groups are 10 sets. So there's 50 colors altogether. We also have a few other ink pads. Now these we call our classic ink pads. They are dye-based ink, which means they're water-based, and they dry pretty much as soon as you stamp them. So they're really quick drying. They are not color fast. They are translucent, meaning you can layer inks upon one another to get different effects. And they can fade over time. So I wouldn't put these like in the sun, like in a window that the sun shines through. That color will fade over time. Okay, now there's another ink pad that I use quite a bit called Memento. This is a black fade resistant dye-based ink. So it's the same as this. It is quick to dry. And another perk of dye-based inks on both of these is that they clean up pretty well. Some of the darker colors can stain your stamps a little bit, but other than that, they clean up nicely, meaning it's not hard to get the ink off of your stamp. Okay. It might stain the stamp, but it's not hard to get the ink off. Okay. This type of ink is dye-based. And that also means both these types and this one are water soluble, meaning that if you wash water over them, they will bleed. Okay. And I'll tell you why that's important here in a minute. Another type of ink that we have is called StazOn. It is a permanent black ink, and it is not water-based. It is a solvent ink. It's actually an alcohol-based ink. And so this is very opaque black. It's very permanent. It will stain your stamps. And here's an example of that. This is got some pink staining, but it also has some black staining on there. I do use this with my photopolymer stamps, even though some people sometimes say you shouldn't. I do use mine all the time, and I've not had any issues. Like I said, it's very permanent. So if you were to stamp this on your cardstock that you were worried about fading, this won't fade over time. So it's very good, rich, black, opaque color, which I love. It does dry very quickly, actually faster than our dye-based pads. So it's really quick drying because it's that alcohol base. And there are certain instances where you're going to want to use this kind of pad as well. And I'll talk about that again in just a minute. One more ink pad that we carry, actually two more ink pads that we carry are called, one is called VersaMark. It is what's called a watermark ink pad. This is a pretty well-loved ink pad. They come a little nicer looking than this, but it's basically clear ink. And so when you stamp it on a color of cardstock, it'll give you that same image, just a little darker on the cardstock than it originally would be. Now you can get the same effect by using the same color of ink on cardstock, but you have to have the ink pad. So I just pulled out a scrap here, and I'm just going to stamp this with my little stamp. Okay, now this is a thick ink, and so it takes a lot longer to dry than these pads. Okay, so you can see this just stamps a little darker than the ink pad, or than the cardstock itself. Now if I were to take the same color of ink and use it on the cardstock, it's going to come out a little darker, but it also will work. So that's a VersaMark, that's the ink pad. So this is darker, this is lighter. So it's a watermark effect. It's really pretty, isn't it? Okay, now that I've explained those types of ink pads. There's one final one I want to talk about, and this is our craft pad. This is a pigment ink pad. Pigment ink is going to be thicker like the VersaMark, and it is going to be much more opaque ink. It will take a lot longer to dry, but that means that you can use it for different types of techniques. Again, we'll cover those in just a moment. Now, pigment ink, the only pigment ink pad that Stampin' Up! Carries is this white ink pad, and it's a really beautiful color, or it gives you a really beautiful effect on cards. So let me stamp that same flower. I gotta clean this really quick, and we'll stamp it in white ink on my cardstock. Now, it's a thicker ink, so you can see I'm doing a good job of inking up my stamp, and then we'll stamp that down, and there is the white ink. So it's a different effect, but it's very pretty. Now, the VersaMark ink and the white ink we can use for a technique called heat embossing. We'll probably do that pretty soon in my little series of videos here. But these are the three different types of ink. So we have dye-based ink, we have solvent ink, and we have pigment ink or watermark ink. So I guess that's really four types. Dye-based, solvent, watermark, and then pigment is the white ink. Okay. Now, what do you do with all these? How do you know when to use them? So the workhorse ink pads, I think, in most stampers' arsenal are the dye-based pads. They're easy to use. They're easy to clean. They dry really quickly. We use them a lot. We'll make a card with these in just a moment. The next one that I use most often is a Memento pad, because this is kind of my everyday black ink pad. Memento is also great for use with our Stampin' Blend markers. These are alcohol-based markers. So the markers are alcohol-based. We want to use them with the dye-based ink. That way they won't bleed. The StazOn ink pad is alcohol-based ink, so we don't want to use the alcohol markers with that. We can watercolor with this because water won't bleed with the alcohol, so that's perfect for alcohol pads. The StazOn pad is great for watercoloring. It's great for coloring with our regular markers, not the alcohol-based markers, but our Stampin' Write markers. And then also for use with our ink pads and blender pens, not Stampin' Blends, but blender pens. If you're confused, it's okay. So a blender pen is a two-ended pen like this, and it's kind of almost like VersaMark ink. It's not, but it's almost like that. So you can pick up color from any of these pads and then color with the StazOn for like an outline black image. So that's when you would use this. I will also show you another reason why I use StazOn here in just a minute. Okay, I'll explain it then. VersaMark pad, again, is beautiful for creating backgrounds. So we can create that beautiful tone-on-tone effect. It's also good for embossing, heat embossing, when you sprinkle powder over your image and melt it. So it's great for that. And there's also a few other types of techniques that you can do that are a little bit more advanced. We'll probably look at those eventually. And then finally, that white ink, or that pigment-based ink, we call it craft ink, same thing. This, again, stays wet longer. It is embossable, and it looks really nice on cardstock like that. Okay? So those are the four types of inks. Let's make a card. Don't worry, the card is really quick and easy. Hopefully that helps you. I'm going to see if I can put together a chart to kind of help understand all of that. Okay, so last week we introduced one of our most useful tools, which is the Stampin' Trimmer. So I've got my card here. This is a half a sheet of thick white cardstock, our basic white cardstock, thick. And thick is good for card bases, so I really like that because it's a little heavier weight cardstock, kind of like our colored cardstocks are. And it works great. So I've folded it with my bone folder. Now what I want to do is actually trim off just a little sliver of my card. So I'm going to open this back up, And then I like to measure on the right-hand side of my ruler, and I'm actually going to cut 1/4 of an inch off. So that first line that kind of goes all the way down, I'm gonna line my cardstock up with that and give it a cut. Okay, so I just cut that little sliver off. So now my card has it's the same size, but now there's just a little missing off the front, okay? And what we're gonna do is create a little peak. So I'm also gonna bring in some of our fun paper. This is black glitter paper. I'm going to cut myself a sliver of this, a little bit bigger this time. I'm gonna do 1/2 of an inch. Okay, so I've just cut that. And now what I'm going to do is glue this to the inside of my card. Okay, so I'll take my adhesive. This is Stamp and Seal. There's lots of different types of adhesive, and it really gets down to your personal preference. I personally love my adhesive on a tape runner. It's quick and easy to use. Some people don't like it, and it is a little bit more expensive. A good alternative, if you don't like this, is liquid glue, and I'm going to show that on our next card. Liquid glue is very economical, and a little goes a long way. Okay, so now you can see I have a card, but it's fancy because there's black glitter paper showing. Now let's do a little stamping on here. I actually created this card, and I apologize to those of you who might see this early, but I've created a really cute card for one of my classes that I offer, and this thank you card goes in their box, and it features the Merry Snowflakes stamp set. So I'm going to take these 3 gorgeous snowflakes and stamp them in 3 colors, and I've got a great color combination here: Fresh Freesia, Magenta Madness, and Pale Papaya. So I'll take these 3 colors. I'm going to work with the magenta first. Again, this is our dye-based ink, so it is going to work really nicely. It'll dry really quickly and add some beautiful color. And it's translucent, so if I overlap my images a little bit, you'll be able to see right through that ink, which is nice. Okay, I'll take the medium-sized snowflake, and I'm going to ink that one up with Pale Papaya ink. You can see I'm tapping. That's how I like to tap or stamp. Some people like to do different methods, but I like to tap. Okay. You don't have to gush either. That's important to know. All right, and then finally I'm going to take my smallest image, and you can see I overlapped a little bit, and that looks good. And my final image is the Fresh Freesia, overlapping just a touch right there. So I've got 3 bright, fun colors for snowflakes. These are a little out-of-the-box colors, but I love them. Okay, now I'm also using a separate stamp set that has some really fun sentiments in it. It's called Encircled in Warmth. And so I'm going to take this Let It Snow, which I think is perfect for this card, and I'm going to stamp it with some of my Memento black. So this is just kind of my basic workhorse ink Memento black, and I'll just stamp Let It Snow right on the bottom there, and that looks great. Okay. Now, when I close this up, I've got a really fun card. Now, I can actually take and kick this up one more notch, because I like adding that little something extra. And for that, I'm going to take some of my black matte dots. Let me pull these out of the package so you can see them. They come in 2 sizes, large and small, and I'm just going to add these to my card. So I'll take and put the small dot here, the small dot in the center of this, and then I'll take the large dot and put it in here. By the way, this was something I just thought of right now. So isn't that fun? What a cute card. Now, if you're not into snowflakes, and let's be honest, not everybody is, maybe you have a horrible life and you have to live in the tropics. I don't know. I say that because I live in the Midwest and we're coming in on winter, and it's a long winter here in Iowa. But I do enjoy winter until about January, and then I'm pretty much over it. But anyway, while I love snowflakes, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. So let me show you another card just like this one that we're going to make that features a different stamp set. Okay, so I'll do the exact same thing as before. I'm going to start with a basic white card base. I'm going to give that a nice crease with my bone folder, and then I'm going to cut off a 1/4 inch just like I did on our last card. I'll also bring in my black glitter paper and slice off another sliver of that. Okay, now what I want to do with this card is I'm going to show you how to use a different type of adhesive, and that was the liquid glue. This is a well-loved bottle of liquid glue. You can put together at least 100 cards with one of these bottles of glue, so it's very economical. A very small amount of it goes a long way, and this bottle is actually almost empty. So I'm just going to squeeze a really thin layer of that glue out, and then I'll position my paper right over it. What I love about liquid glue is it gives you a little time to kind of wiggle. So if you didn't get everything lined up, you can kind of smoosh it around till it's exactly where you want it, and then it will dry and hold very, very well. It's strong once it's dry, so that's a great feature of liquid glue. Okay, so there I've adhered my strip nicely. Now let's do my stamping. I'm gonna do a kind of a spring set for this. I've got the In Bloom stamp set. This is a really fun stamp set that actually I absolutely love. There's some great sentiments in here. So let's take and stamp a card with this. And for this one, I'm gonna use those flowers. So let me clean my white inked flower. I've got my Stampin' Chamois, which does a great job of cleaning. Okay, so for the first flower, I'm going to do that same color again, which is Magenta Madness, one of my faves. So I'm just tapping, making sure I get plenty of ink on my surface of my flower, and we'll stamp that down. Oh, perfect. Then I will take another one and use my same color combination. So this is Pale Papaya. Ink that up nicely, and we'll stamp it. A little overlap, because that's always fun. And then finally, Fresh Freesia. Now you might notice that this is a photopolymer stamp set. We can see right through those images. There's 2 types of stamps, red rubber or photopolymer. Photopolymer is great for being able to see through and do what we call 2-step stamping. So I'm actually going to add another image over the top of each of these, and that image is going to be in black. Now this time I'm going to choose to use my StazOn black. I want the black to show up really nice and crisply on top of these images, so I'm going to choose a nice, rich, opaque black, okay? And so I'll stamp one image in the center of that. Oh, it looks great. Now, one thing to know about StazOn is it does dry really quickly. I mentioned that before. So when you're using the ink pad, you actually should close it between uses so that it doesn't dry out quicker. Now we're doing kind of quick ones because we'll just quick add the center to that flower and the center to this flower. So how much fun is that? I'll put the lid right back on. So now I've got 3 flowers in kind of the same configuration as the last card I created. I'm going to use one of the sentiments from this stamp set. It's one of my favorites. It says, "Congrats, you're so fancy now." If that's not the best sentiment, I don't know what could be. So I'm just going to take and ink that up and stamp that kind of right there, overlapping a little bit. Again, throw the lid right back on my ink pad so that it doesn't dry out too quickly. When I close this up, we've got the little shimmer on there, and we can embellish this much in the same way as our last card. So I'm going to take, this time I'm going to put a large dot in the center of that flower just because it's kind of got the biggest center. And I'll put a medium or smaller sized one in this one. And then I'm actually not going to put one in this flower only because of the way the center is. It's kind of got an open spot and I think that looks nice. So there we go. 2 awesome cards and 2 different inks. This is really nice opaque black ink. This ink is quick to clean up dye-based ink, dye-based pads, and a little shimmer paper in the back. Such fun cards. Now, if you would like to purchase any of the supplies used to create these cards, I will have them all listed in the description of this video as well as on my blog. If you would like to order anything, I would so greatly appreciate your business. And the best part is through November 18th, I know it's only 2 more days, today and tomorrow, these ink pads are 15% off, and Cardstock from our annual catalog is 10% off. And then if you're into it, dyes are 20% off. So it's a great sale to get involved in. And I have fabulous gifts when you order through the Creativity Cave. So when you spend $50, I'll send you the All-Star Tutorial PDF. It's a great 12 video tutorial PDF that includes all kinds of awesome projects. This month, it's going to be projects featuring the Sweet Symmetry Suite in our annual catalog. If you spend $70, you get the PDF plus an embellishment. And if you spend $125, you'll get the PDF plus a grab bag worth $20 or more in fun goodies. All kinds of different things will be in those grab bags. Everything from handmade cards to embellishments to DSP to who knows what other fun little treasures I have. So that special goes through the end of this month, and then the sale from Stampin' Up! Just goes for a couple days. So all of that information is in the description of this video on my blog. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to answer them for you. Otherwise, thank you guys for stamping with me today. I can't wait to see you next week for more awesome inspiration. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.